Hello, I'd like to share a very important but unpopular message. This is mainly for MPs and celebrities and media workers, but I'd also like their followers to understand what's been happening too. I'm asking you to be open-minded enough to listen on something that for many is very difficult, unpopular, and a very urgent truth. Trophy hunting is a subject that has seen mass science denial, with calls for bans that pose one of the biggest threats right now to global biodiversity. You probably won't want to hear this, but please do not switch off. Millions of unknown and less privileged African voices are depending on you to listen. There is a vote on Friday in the House of Commons on a bill to ban trophy hunting imports. It is well-meaning, but it's badly informed and it's very worrying. In the interests of not worsening losses to wildlife and huge areas of wildlife habitat, I'm adding my voice to those asking MPs to please vote against the bill to ban trophy hunting imports and do anything you can to influence other MPs. This is a very toxic and poorly understood issue, where a popular vote win will have devastating unintended consequences for wildlife conservation, and it will result in greater animal suffering. It will increase poaching and human-wildlife conflict, and it will mean the loss of human rights and meat and sustainable jobs in some of the poorest communities across the African continent and globally. Now, it takes an open mind and courage to listen and speak out on difficult issues, and this is one on which science voices, including myself, have had disgusting abuse for daring to tell the truth. But the consequences are too huge to ignore. A while ago, I wrote a piece in the Guardian newspaper about trophy hunting and how well-meaning celebrities and others, including MPs across the political spectrum, with millions of followers between them, have been spreading harmful lies, and the consequences of doing so will be enormous. This is something I don't personally like, but I've had to put my own bias aside and follow the evidence. The campaign to ban trophy hunting and the imports of body parts has cross-party support, and it's based on a pile of lies and deliberately misleading misinformation from animal rights lobbyists. I have investigated this myself in detail. The campaign ignores overwhelming evidence, dismisses local voices, ignores the resulting environmental harm, and it equates to neo-colonial racism. Many well-meaning people find the realities of hunting uncomfortable, including me. It's unpopular among the British public. But the campaign has capitalised on this and indeed made money from it, and the propaganda has been published unquestioningly across all of the British mainstream media for several years. What we are witnessing here is massive science denial and prejudice based on ignorance and bias, not facts. It's a similar masking of the truth to what we see from climate science denial lobbyists and anti-vax campaigners. This campaign has become a battle between conservation scientists and millions of ignored African voices on the one side versus powerful, well-meaning but misinformed and less qualified celebrity influencers and animal lovers and media campaigns based on a lack of understanding. By removing trophy hunting at its trade, we undermine the viability of a sustainable working economic model of conservation without having a viable and locally acceptable alternative in place. So I'd like you to please listen to voices from African countries. I'm now going to read out a letter to the UK government signed by over 100 of them, representing communities in Namibia, Botswana, Angola and Zambia, who are pleading with politicians to listen before they vote. It came to our attention that the British Parliament is in the process of passing a bill into law which intends to prohibit the importation of hunted trophies into Britain. The British government should be aware that this bill would negatively impact the conservation of wildlife and the livelihoods of our communities. As communities living in the landscape, we recognise the importance of wildlife and other natural resources and the role they play in maintaining biodiversity in our shared environments. We have inherited these natural resources from our forefathers and invested in their conservation with the support of our governments and by forming community-based organisations in the form of conservancies, community forests, communal fisheries, trusts, associations and cooperatives. Through our shared government legislation, we have been given right to manage and use our natural resources sustainably for the benefit of our community members and the wildlife. However, conserving these natural resources is costly. It involves heavy capital investments to cover the operational cost of our community-based organisations, such as training and employing conservancy personnel, educating and communicating on the importance of conserving our wild animals, providing other benefits to communities living with wildlife, and monitoring and managing these areas. To finance these costs, much of the income comes from trophy hunting, which is done ethically and is supported by scientific monitoring systems. The data derived from these monitoring systems are used to allocate sustainable quotas by our wildlife management authorities to determine the number of animals to be culled, and this is done in the form of trophy hunting. It should be emphasised that these activities take place on communal farmland, where we are farming with livestock, crops as well as wildlife, and not in national parks. It's important for you to know that, because the policies and incentives in our countries mean more wildlife is living outside national parks than in them. Therefore, your current bill in Parliament, if passed into law, will have the following ramifications. It will undermine the incentives for our rural farming communities to look after and sustain and manage wildlife. It will increase human-wildlife conflict with those species which are costly for farmers to live with, such as predators and elephants and hippos, and it will reduce compensation, and that will make farmers unwilling to have the animals on their land. It will mean an unsustainable local increase in some species, such as elephants, that have a drastic impact on vegetation and habitats, and thereby impact on the broader biodiversity, including a number of endangered species. With reduced revenue from trophy hunting, poachers will increase because there will be less funding to pay salaries to the community game guards for their anti-poaching patrols to deter poachers. The nutrition of people will be affected because there will be less meat from hunted animals to distribute to communities. If trophy hunting ends, our game lands will be encroached on by other land use activities, with the potential to increase deforestation and destroy the natural habitat of wild animals, resulting in a decline in many wild species. We all know that deforestation will increase the carbon footprint and contribute to global warming. The loss of revenue from trophy hunting will drastically increase unemployment in our communities, resulting in poverty, with the potential of community members becoming poachers. It is sad to mention that we feel this is another way of recolonising Africa, with all the consequences that had befallen our forefathers. We would therefore like to ask British parliamentarians to come to Africa to see our conservation efforts, as opposed to listening to animal rights activists who have no knowledge and experience of living with these wild animals. Alternatively, let your ambassadors engage with us, the communities within these organisations, whose aim is the conservation of natural resources and improving community livelihoods, and let them provide you with the facts. So that's a letter. Who am I? My name is Alex Morss. I'm an ecologist, a writer and an author. It's important to tell you that I'm not pro-hunting. I am pro-evidence-based conservation and respecting human rights. I have never hunted, and I'm not funded by any hunting interests. I'm not personally or professionally connected with any hunting, and I never have been. But we are now living in the 6th mass extinction, and habitat loss is currently the biggest global threat to species. The consequences of not listening and respecting this truth, however uncomfortable we might personally find it, will be devastating for people and wildlife. So, I stand by the truth, and I hope more of you will too. Thank you for listening.